I'm James Hahn II.
And I'm Mark McClure.
And you're listening to the Oil and Gas This Week podcast, brought to you by Red Wing. This is the show for busy oil pros who want to quickly keep their finger on the pulse of the industry. And this is episode 55, Mark McClure. I'm not going to sing any Sammy Hagar because we try to forget about that version of Van Halen, right? How are you doing this morning, brother?
Doing good. If we sound a little funny, we're in Houston and it's tree pollen season, which means both of us have a little bit of allergy stuff going on. But other than that, I'm doing good.
Yeah, it's that time of year, that time of my life where I'm feeling a little creative. I want to get out of the box a little bit, and so I went and did improv for the first time last Saturday. Mark,
how'd that go?
It went well. I didn't have any clue what I was doing because it was a quote-unquote improv jam where it's these improv people from all over the city come together at the Station Theater, and it's on Saturdays and so forth. But I walked in a little late. I didn't know how it worked or anything like that. We were doing a little intro game, and during the intro game, one of the things was there was a snake involved, and I acted like I picked it up and killed it. Whilst performing my little act, I completely shredded the inseam of my jeans and got to perform like that the rest of the time.
You ripped your pants in front of a whole crowd of people you didn't know?
As soon as I met them. As I walked in the door, hey, what's going on? Yeah, I'm new. And I'm just trying to keep up because I've never been in, and these guys are all veterans, and I have no clue what I'm doing. And that was the first thing that happened.
Nice way to introduce yourself. You know, it's funny you say that. There's still people at Chevron that talk about the time about 17 years ago that I was doing a presentation, a bunch of executives out in San Ramon, their corporate headquarters, and my pants were unzipped, but I didn't know my pants were unzipped. And to this day,
you gave a presentation to Chevron with your fly down. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and to this day, some of those people that are still there still tease me about that. So yeah, I know that feeling.
Close the deal, though, baby, right?
We actually did close the deal, even with my fly unzipped.
We would speculate on if that helped.
Man, I hope not.
Right? All right, we've got a lot of stories to get into this morning, and so why don't we just go ahead and kick things off with Platts. Rosneft signs deal to increase Indian involvement in East Siberian oil gas projects. Always interesting to see what Russia's up to. What are they up to in this case?
Yeah, so what Russia's doing is basically looking for other markets to sell their oil and gas to. In India, we've talked about this before, India's economy is growing like crazy. They will pass up China both in consumption of crude oil and natural gas and population in the near future, which is crazy to think about. But this is just a way for Russia to find another market for their crude oil and gas. And then, quite honestly, it's good for the Indian people. It's people that live in Europe or in the U.S. don't understand how most of the world's power is delivered. It's basically delivered unreliably. So even in some of the major cities in India, there's rolling blackouts that you can't predict because there's literally not enough electricity to supply the entire demand. So by Russia opening up this market, working with India, they'll be able to increase the electrical output and hopefully get to the point where they have reliable power for their people.
Is there any geopolitics involved? Because I see China might be investing in this.
There's a ton of geopolitics involved in this, right? Everything from Russia's losing market share because of the attacks by OPEC to Russia can't produce some of their more advanced fields because of the sanctions by the U.S. and Europe. The Russia economy crashing in recession. There's a bunch of geopolitics here, but the basic thing that's going on here is Russia's trying to open up a new market to sell their oil and gas.
In some of the background on it, apparently they divested some interest in an Indian company to get some concessions. Do you know the background there?
Yeah, it's so what's happening there is that in order to get agreement for this deal, Russia, the Rosneft, which is the Russian company that we're talking about here, was asked to back out of some joint ventures they had in some other Indian companies. And the Indian government, that's the right thing for them to do. What they're trying to do is make sure that Rosneft or any other large oil and gas company doesn't have an exclusive monopolized market in their country.
It just reminded me, we talked about Motiva on the last This Week in Oil and Gas Careers podcast. and I didn't throw it. I'll have to dig it up and put it in the extras. But you and I were talking about the interesting way that it's a Shell slash uh, Saudi Aramco.
Yeah.
They're splitting up.
There's Motiva splitting that up.
Yeah, they're
Oh, you know something I don't know.
they're
Yeah.
going they're going their separate ways.
Yeah. Interesting. It'd be interesting to figure out why they're doing that. That's been a JV for
25 years or something, you said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, I totally forgot to. I'll dig it up and throw it in the show notes, and maybe we can have a follow-up conversation on that one. All right, let's move over to Pakistan, I should say. Capital intensive industry seeking foreign partners.
Yeah. So this is touching on some of the stuff we just talked about that's going on in India. So Pakistan also, like India, does not have enough power for its people, right? And they have these huge rolling blackouts all over the country, very unreliable. Um, and here's a good article by Worldfolio talking about how downstream in Pakistan is growing because of these low crude prices and the fact the government needs to generate more um, um, energy for its people. And so what they're doing is they're doing a really, really good job of looking for foreign partners that have capital, basically cash that can finance these projects. But they're being very careful not to let anybody develop a monopoly on this. And so this is good work by the Pakistani government, and it's also good work for the industry as a whole, right? So anytime you start building big infrastructure, it's a lot of jobs being created. So it's Pakistan's downstream is growing, and they're growing it the right way.
This is, I don't want to get too political, but I recently heard a conversation between someone who what I considered pretty far of left leaning and far of right leaning, and both of them agreed that Pakistan was the number one enemy of America. Is there anything to be said about that when we're reading this article?
No, and not to go down the political route. I would when I think of all the enemies the U.S. has that are actually worthwhile enemies, Pakistan doesn't even top my top 10 list.
All right. I don't want to go too far down that road. Just tell us a bit more, because there's a lot of numbers in this article here.
Yeah, so they're talking about the amount of employment that the downstream section in Pakistan occupies, how much that's going to grow. They're talking about the productions of the Pakistani state oil company is they're up to 40,000 barrels a day for one of their refineries, which is drops compared to what a U.S. refinery can put out. It's they're signing some deals to get some LNG plants and some regasification plants in place. All of this is geared toward being able to produce more energy for the country.
And is it mainly driven by downstream investment? Because they're talking a lot about that in this article.
Yeah, so you have to read this article in its entirety. They keep using the word downstream. The true goal for this is to actually produce more electricity, right? Produce more electricity cleanly, and one of the best fuels for that is natural gas. And whether that's gas that you produce yourself or whether that's LNG that you import, but those facilities are expensive, and so they are partnering with other big companies that have the cash to help finance these projects.
Yeah, the total, they talk about this, the new complex that they're bringing online is the Baiko Group's second facility and brings the Pakistani company's total refining capacity to 155,000 barrels per day. Is that a lot or a
No.
little? Okay.
Not compared to the U.S. refineries. They could do 155,000 barrels a minute. For a country as small as Pakistan, and for a country that just a few years ago had almost no refining capacity, imported everything. That's good. I mean, they're going down the right path.
Yeah, so that economic prosperity only drives good things for that country, and we've talked before about the benefits of bringing Western capitalism further east. So let's move over to Uganda. We shall minimize cost and maximize production. Total boss.
Yeah, so this is one of the upper managements at Total, which is one of the super majors out there, and I'm not even trying to pronounce his name, but he's talking about his 20 years, basically his 20 years of success in Total, and how Total has taken a long-term outlook on everything they do, including the work they're doing in Uganda and other parts of Africa. They have a bunch of joint ventures out there. They have long-term leases. They're looking at they're looking at investing in Africa over a 25-year period. I mean, Total is a super major. They do things right. And they're also working on financing and help to try to clean up some of the corruption out there. One of the things I thought was really cool is that they just recently signed an MOU with 3 JV partners, which basically means there's going to be 4.
What's an MOU? Sorry.
An MOU is a contractual term. It's Memorandum of Understanding, I think is what it stands for. But it's basically a contract saying that you're going to agree that you're going to sign a contract later on. It's like the pre-contract contract. But what's interesting is they signed with 3 other partners, which means there's 4 separate companies working to build these pipelines in Uganda. So this is Total showing how, when you're big and you know what you're doing and you have a long-term view of the market, this is how you do business.
Talk about the work that they're doing in the Ivory Coast.
So the Ivory Coast, they're doing a bunch of deep water, ultra deep water, and it's going to be interesting to see if that stuff continues. I was actually talking to somebody just a day or 2 ago that's a portfolio manager for one of the deep water operators. And I never thought about this, but one of the things that's going on in deep water, it's been hot lately, is something called HPHT, high pressure, high temperature. And it's basically super cool, cutting edge technology to be able to drill in conditions that are almost, you would think, impossible to drill in and do it safely. And that whole HPHT investment in research and development by companies is probably going to slide and maybe even disappear, because we're living in a hydrocarbon abundant world right now. We have a surplus. That's why the price of crude's so low. And so why would you invest money in getting that expensive, HPHT deep water oil out of the ground? So there's a side effect that I didn't think of, and that is basically that the money that the oil and gas companies are putting into research and development may stop for the expensive oils in deep water, like the Ivory Coast.
Interesting to me, we've talked before about the proliferation of the intelligence in how to extract the most oil out of the ground being very specialized here in America. And they talk about how they are bringing new technologies to those oil fields in Africa. One example being 3D cableless seismic technology was the first time they'd ever used it, as well as horizontal drilling. So it's good to see the people around the world learning these things so that they can take advantage of this abundance you've been talking about since the forecast show.
Yeah, it's this is a part of the country that their population really will benefit from the prosperity from the oil and gas industry.
All right, let's keep it moving over here. And I say keep it moving because someone wants to keep multinationals out of the oil retail business. What's this about?
Yeah, so it's kind of neat. This is a guy, Dr. Isaac Asmo Antois. He's a social worker and an economics expert out in Ghana, in Africa. And so what he's saying, and I can see this concern. What he's saying is that the large multinationals, so the super majors, do not need to have a monopoly on the downstream side of business in Ghana. And interesting enough, the other African nations around there are putting laws in place to try to keep that from happening. And it's the right thing to do. Interesting in Ghana is they're actually putting laws in place to make it easier for that to happen. So basically, you pick somebody like we're talking about Total. So you pick somebody like Total. In Ghana, they actually can produce the oil, ship it, refine it, and sell those refined products. And the government is propping that up, which then gives Total, if you think about it. And by the way, folks, Total's not doing this. I'm just using them as an example. That gives Total a piece of the market that is basically locked down like a monopoly. So then they can use that to play the pricing game to maximize their profits. That's not something you want to let a company do inside a country. So this guy's talking about how Ghana's political situation needs to change so that you can't have that type of monopoly, which also encourages local businesses, local entrepreneurs, especially in the downstream section, to flourish. And that would be more free market. So I don't know the backstory of this, but if everything in this article is correct, I think that the Ghana government probably needs to look at a way to make sure that large companies with a lot of political and financial leverage can't lock down a monopoly on downstream in their country.
It's just really interesting to continue to listen and follow the way that these things develop around the world. But let's bring things back to America, where we have an update from JD Spurra on this is the we keep raving. I at least keep raving about this particular site. All lawyers explaining things in plain language for us. Recent bankruptcy cases may have a significant impact on the midstream oil and natural gas pipeline industry. This is, of course, a follow-up to the story from Oil and Gas Investor a week or two ago we talked about. So what sort of details do they get into here that we haven't already covered?
Yeah. So what's happened since the last time we talked about this, and if you didn't hear the other show, basically the way pipeline companies make money is they go out and see where there's a need for transport. They find local producers and they sign long-term contracts. And once they have those contracts, then they know they have the money. Then they build a pipeline. So it's really hard not to make money in that industry. And part of what they do to protect themselves is in the contracts, even if the company goes bankrupt, they are entitled to their full and rightful share. So it protects them. So what's happened is we've had two separate operators go to court and say, look, this is not fair that I'm having to meet these financial requirements while we're getting ready to go out of business. And if those two companies did it, one judge has actually sided with them. And that was the bankruptcy debtor on Sabine Oil and Gas. The other one, the judge hasn't made a ruling yet. But if this sets a precedence, it's going to fundamentally change the financial business model of the midstream companies. And the thing that I'm, after I've talked about this so much and I've thought this through, the other thing that I'm curious to see what's going to happen. So if you go through bankruptcy, like Chapter 11 bankruptcy, you're basically asking the courts to allow you to move some stuff around and get out some under debt so you can keep your company intact, so you can at least keep some people employed and eventually maybe pay all that money back, which is a good thing, right? But if you let these companies, these operators get out from their pipeline contracts, that oil and gas that they're producing still has to be brought to market for the operator to make money. The only way to bring it to market is in that pipeline that that company built. So to me, when I'm looking at this, I almost look at it like a bluff game, right? So is the operator trying to bluff the pipeline operator and to get him to cut his rates or his terms by going to the courts and doing this, knowing that even if the courts say yes, they still have to pay the pipeline guy to move their stuff to market or they will go out of business. So this is a story that we really need to stay on top of. This could fundamentally change the midstream industry in the U.S.
I've said time and again, and I think most listeners would agree, I'm no expert, especially around law and these types of things. The first thing that comes to mind as I hear you talking, though, is moral hazard. Just unfettered moral hazard. If it does set a precedent where people can just walk away from contracts like that, what does that do to the rest of the industry?
Yeah, so it won't go where they can just walk away from contracts. What will happen is there'll be rules set around this, but this is good. This is good trigger. I mean, this is good trigger all kinds of chaos in the pipeline industry. You have all these pipelines that are being built right now while we're talking that are funded by investors, and these investors have confidence they'll get the money back because they have these long-term contracts signed. Well, if I'm an investor and all of a sudden this sets precedent, and I know that those contracts may not be worthwhile or may not, be able to be enforced, I don't want to invest in a pipeline anymore. It's too big a risk. Well, without the capital to build the pipelines can't be built. So, I mean, this literally could and if you keep following down that road, that means that the pipeline companies are going to have to come up with another financial model, which is going to be just a big fundamental change in the way they do business. What if a pipeline company only would build a pipeline when the people that live in that area are willing to pay a tax? I mean, and it's not the pipeline company's fault. They have to have money to build a pipeline. A pipeline's expensive to build. So we'll stay on top of this and see where this goes. It's hard for me to make a judgment call on this because I respect the fact of an independent operator, especially a small one, having trouble in this low crude price market, wanting to keep the doors open, keeping its people employed, and just trying to get some relief. But I also see the pipeline company side too. Like, dude, you made an agreement. You signed a contract. We explained this to you. I'm sorry that the price of oil's down, but this affects our business and our ability to keep our people working. So let's just follow this and see where it ends up.
It feels like a real Pandora's box, so we will continue to follow it. Moving over to more arguments, I guess you could say, around regulation or things that happen in courts, however we want to talk about it. Virginia ground zero in drilling debate to learn its fate soon.
Yeah, this article must be just a little bit old. So the fate's already sealed. So what happens, the Obama administration wanted to allow offshore drilling on the East Coast, basically. So they had a bunch of pushback, and there's a bunch of people that are looking forward to it because once again, it create jobs, prosperity, blah blah blah. And just yesterday, the administration pulled that and said they're not looking for offshore drilling on the East Coast. So it's not going to happen in this in this political environment. We'll see what the next political environment is. Honestly, the people on the East Coast that are against this, they're silly. I mean, come to Houston, go to Lafayette, Louisiana. Even this low crude price market, look at the money that's pumped in those local economies because of the offshore business in the Gulf of Mexico. It's everybody thinks of Macondo. Do you know how many wells have been drilled? It's at 0.00001% risk. You have way more risk in agriculture, cause environmental impacts in this country than oil and gas drilling. So the debate doesn't matter anymore. The president administration has pulled its request to open offshore drill on the East Coast. We'll see where it goes. I'm hoping that in the next political environment, people will respond favorably to this, and we can go out there because there's a lot of reserves on the East Coast, and those states and those local economies would benefit greatly if they open that up.
Well, being from Michigan as I am, the first thing I think of is, obviously jobs are a big deal, but come on, guys, you lived through the winter. How can you be against this? How do you heat your homes? Or do you chop down the wood yourselves?
Yeah, good point.
Because I grew up through 30 years of Michigan winters, which aren't all that different from East Coast winters, and you are. I think you've used the analogy before. It's wearing a fur coat to an fur rally or something like that. It's just like the consistency in the position. There is none.
This is the only industry I know where the people that don't like this industry fully support us financially.
Right. Right. Thanks for your support. Thank you for your support, anti-oil and gas people. I'm putting this in here because of the fact that it's sort of an elephant in the room that we haven't talked about in terms of earthquakes in Oklahoma. So boom times for fracking toxic waste comes to a shaky end.
Yeah, this is bull. So let me tell you the truth about earthquakes. Are earthquakes on the rise in the U.S. or in North America? Yes, absolutely. You can look at the seismic data that proves it. Are earthquakes on the rise in Oklahoma where they do fracking? Yes. Are earthquakes on the rise in Arkansas where they do no fracking? Yes. Is the percent of increase in earthquakes the same between Oklahoma and Arkansas? Yes. So there's an increase in seismic activity in North America, but it's not due to fracking. It has nothing to do at all with fracking. And no matter what you read, no matter what you see out there, they're not connected. There is an increase in seismic activity, but it's the same percent increase in states that don't have fracking. So this is an article about how in Oklahoma, one of the ways they dispose of frack water is they do deep well injection, which sounds scary, but the U.S. has been doing that with toxic stuff for over 100 years. You go deep enough and you get into the right layers of rock, and it's fine. So this operator, when everybody else was drilling wells, he figured out the smart thing for him to do is to drill a wastewater well so that he could charge producers for their wastewater to dispose of it. And so his business, quite frankly, was booming when the oil was booming. Now, because of the slowdown in drilling, he's getting less disposal water to deal with, and he has to charge less. And then there's been a bunch of regulations regulating deep water disposal wells, which has hurt his business. So basically, he's getting ready to go upside down. He went from boom to bust.
What is the long-term effect of because even among people who aren't informed that I would typically kind of just discount, they seem to have become pretty educated on disposal wells. Is there some other technology that's going to come around that's going to have to replace this?
Yeah, disposal wells are old technology. They're already on the way out for a bunch of reasons. One is actually efficiency. It makes more financial sense to put the right stuff in place to clean up that water and reuse it. And what's happening is in all the frac fields, they're building the infrastructure. So what'll happen is 3 or 4 or 6 operators will get together. They'll put in the money. They'll build the wastewater treatment facilities. They'll build the pipelines to move that water around, and then they share in the cost, but they also share in the benefit. And that water is so clean when it comes out that by law, you can use it to water organic crops. Yeah. So the technology's there. It's being implemented now. You'll see a wastewater injection go away because it's just not financially sound.
And you have a contact or two in that realm, don't you?
I have a couple of contacts. So shout out to Thomas with the new Frackers project. He's actually started a nonprofit to help spread that technology. He's not trying to make money on it. He's trying to spread that technology to help the oil and gas industry and the environment. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's great stuff and shows that we'll always come up with a greater technology and I don't know. You
We
say
fix problems.
we
In
fix
this
problems.
industry,
Yeah.
we fix problems.
Yeah, we fix problems. You say it all the time. The engineers in this industry, it's NASA. Yeah, I know you can put people, in space for a year, but we can drill at however many 1,000 feet deep at whatever temperature
Yeah,
and
I
not
say this
have
all the time,
things
but a
melt.
subsea engineer in oil and gas makes a NASA engineer look like a Lego builder.
All right. So speaking of the intelligence, we have some wisdom coming here. Unconventional wisdom, building a conventional oil company in an era of shale.
This is so cool. This is Scott Cohen, who's founded Iroquois Capital. So Scott's doing something basic. Scott's out there looking for contrarian opportunities. And you may say, what the hell is a contrarian opportunity? That's an investment scenario where when everybody else zigs, you zag. So in his case, while everybody's worried about money and they're selling off assets, he goes, I'll just buy them for pennies on the dollar. We've talked about this before. So he's built a whole company called Petro River Oil Corporation, and that's doing nothing but going out there buying assets, not just in the shale plays, all over the world right now, because he knows that it's going to come back. So, they've bought stuff in California. They bought stuff in Ireland and Denmark in, the shell plays. And this guy's just super smart. He knows the markets could come back. He knows right now he can get stuff for pennies on the dollar. And he's out there buying stuff left and right. This is cool.
What is he? So is he just buying acreage and holding it until it happens? Is he doing any drilling?
No. He's building a whole company. And guess what? Their break-even point is $20 a barrel. He's building a whole company where at $20 a barrel, they don't lose money.
Wow. So
yeah, isn't that cool?
In they're all conventional plays that he's
No. He's involved in everything. He's involved in a lot of shale. I'm sorry, people. And he's involved in a lot of shale in other countries that have even tried to tap into it yet, knowing that he can take his operators to Ireland, tap in that shale, and get oil and gas out of the ground for dirt cheap.
Well, we saw a lot of that happening at Nape. People there buying things for pennies on the dollar. I wonder if he was there on the show floor.
I bet one of his people there. I bet.
Probably. All right. We talked about offshore a little bit earlier. Let's sneak in our Seeking Alpha story of the week, because what's a show of ours without a Seeking Alpha story? Offshore drilling, the rally is fading.
Yeah, this is Vladimir Zernov. And I have to agree with this article. I actually, if you go back to, I think, May of 2013, I did an email video short or answering emails, and somebody asked me the same question: what do I think is going to happen offshore? And I think especially deep water and ultra deep water, that market's going to fade and stay faded for a very long time. The shelf plays in the conventional reservoirs are still fine. Now, I say all that. I'm saying that from a growth point of view, right? Do I think there's going to be more deep water and ultra deep water projects scoped out and completed in the next 10 years? No. Now, the ones that are in play now, they will bring those projects online, and there are some that are planned that make fiscal sense. But as a whole, I think you're going to see a decline in new projects in deep water and ultra deep water.
Is that all driven by the price?
Yeah, I mean, even at $60 a barrel, which is what we think is going to get back to. A lot of these expensive deep water, ultra deep projects are upside down. They lose money. The only company I know that, and I know what their number is, the only company I know that builds their financial model to, even in deep water, to account for this low crude price is Exxon. So Exxon's just going to keep on chugging ahead. But if you're Transocean or Noble Drilling, any of these drilling contractors that have these drill ship fleets, you need to readjust your portfolio, because your very expensive, high horsepower, new ultra deep water rigs are not going to be contracted up for years like they were in the past.
What would that look like?
So you would probably invest in more reef, shallow water stuff, so more jackups, more spars, that sort of stuff. FPSOs are an interesting twist on things. Brazil invested heavy in FPSOs, and their oil and gas industries crashed because of corruptions, which then tells me you have a bunch of FPSOs on the market for a very low day rate. So it's just a matter of looking at if you're a drilling contractor, looking at your fleet, trying to anticipate where the demand's going to be, and then try to tailor your fleet for that demand before the demand hits there.
I just realized that Christian, who won our Red Wing offshore bag a couple weeks ago, he was talking about, because he works for Pacific Exploration. I can't remember the rest of the company, but what they do is they're working on some LNG projects, Canada and some other places, and they go and buy these tankers essentially for dirt cheap, so that they can basically, I don't know what, remanufacture them, refabricate them to be able to hold LNG, and then just run pipelines out to them offshore. So that might be something. Although I sound very uneducated about it, because
so that
it was
that
the
whole
best I could
world
do.
has been around for a while, right? Risers, manifolds, pipe system, all subsea type of stuff, loading, unloading, processing offshore in vessels. That happens in oil as well as LNG.
Yeah. So apologies to Christian for the horrible, horrible summary that I just gave, but I was just trying to come up with another way, because if this is really headed in this direction, like you said, people are going to need to have to pivot.
Yeah. So what's going to happen is companies are going to end up with a bunch of rigs that aren't being utilized. And it's expensive to stack those rigs. It's basically storing them. And when you stack them, it takes a couple years if they need to go back to market before you can get them back in the market. And by then, they're antiquated. So it's for the drilling contractors, their day rates could be low for a while, for next 3, 4, 5, 6 years. They're going to have surplus rigs on the market. So the smart companies are going to figure this out and pivot sooner than later.
We're not going to see any reality TV shows where they auction off the talking
That would
about.
actually make a good reality TV show, but no, I don't think we'll see anything.
What are they, the storage the storage, and everybody stands there and bids before it opens. Anyway, moving on. Does this shale oil legends coming out of retirement signal the bottom of the oil market? Who are we talking about?
We are talking about Mark Papa. He is retiring from EOG Resources. He is one of the key people that use fracking to make money. He is one of the first people to realize that we're going to have cheap natural gas forever. And so he took EOG Resources down a liquids route, which was smart. I mean, just genius at its time, because at that time when he did that, everybody thought gas was the way to go, and everybody's drilling gas wells. He's starting a new company. It's called Silver Run Acquisition Corporation. He has $450 million in cash. And you know what he's doing? He's buying oil and gas assets. Sound familiar?
So that's what it's all about right now. Companies that didn't get over leveraged, and people that are visionaries that can see things further than what's in front of them in terms of prices.
And the fact that he's been through downturns before. He knows this is no different than when the housing crisis happened. My wife had a conniption fit. I took a large part of our savings, and I tapped into our home line of credit, and I bought blue chip stock, GE, Walmart, whatever. And my wife was like, "Are you crazy? The economy's crashing. You spent all our savings on stock." And I go, "Wait, watch and see what happens." And about 18 months later, I sold it, and I made a huge profit. Now, I'm not super smart. I'm not an investor. I've just been through enough market downturns to know that it always comes back. That's what's going on here. Mark Papa knows, he's been through so many downturns. He knows it's coming back. And so he exited from EOG, round up a little bit of cash from his buddies, about $450 million of cash, started another company, started acquiring assets.
And it gave you an opportunity to talk about the one time you were right over your wife, right?
Well, the funny thing now, yeah, she's almost always right. The funny thing now is every time our economy takes a little bit of a nosedive, my wife wants to jump into it. I go, no. You got to wait till it's like bad. That's the only time it's safe to do that.
All right. So there's a lot of talk about Linn Energy out there because they might be filing bankruptcy. Is this blueprint from the past Linn Energy LLC's only hope for survival?
Yeah. So what they're talking about is Linn Energy is in a predicament, right? They have a lot of debt, and they can't get enough credit to help them finance the carry load of that debt. And so what they're looking at doing is forming a MLP, Master Limited Partnership, to get out from under that deck and get some tax benefits, and then later probably roll that back into a C corp. That's exactly what Apache did in the 1980s. The only reason Apache is still around, they did that exact move. So the conditions are very similar. The financial situation that Linn Energy is very similar to where Apache was in 1980s. It's the good thing is if they do that, it keeps the company from going bankrupt, keeps Linn Energy from going bankrupt. We'll see what happens, but this is a good article. What is this article?
It's mysanantonio.com.
Yeah, it's a good article, and I would have to agree with the author of this article, Matthew Diallo. I would suspect that Linn Energy goes down that same route that Apache did in 1980.
How close are they to the brink before they have to make a decision like this?
They were able to reduce their outstanding debt by 1.8 billion, but they still have 9 billion. That's with a B of debt to restructure. So just the carry load on that debt has to be ridiculous, several $1 million a day. So I would think they're going to have to pull the trigger on it this quarter. Doesn't mean it'll be completed this quarter, but I mean, they have to make this decision this quarter.
Yeah, they have to get off the fence one way or the other. All right, we've got one more story here, and we've touched on upstream, downstream, every other way in other countries, but here we go with Pennsylvania ethane cracker still a play.
Yeah, if you're a regular listener to the show, I'm not sure I even need to say anything at this point. So this is a Shell, as in Royal Dutch Shell, has an ethylene cracker in the Appalachians in Pennsylvania. And even with all of Shell's restructuring and selling off of assets and doing everything they can, they're not pulling the plug on this one because it's a moneymaker for them. So the ethylene cracker's still going up. They're not pulling any budgets. They're still gonna hit their key deliverable dates. It's gonna still hire the same number of people. I mean, it's just and there's a bunch of reasons for this. And I was talking to somebody just yesterday about this. The thing that's so interesting about petrochemicals in the U.S. is we have the largest, most robust, most efficient refineries in the world. We have the cheapest feedstock literally in our backyard with no shortage, and we have the cheapest transportation cost. And the whole world, the developing nation, has an appetite for our downstream products, for our petrochemicals, fertilizers, plastics, and all that. Here's another example of how, even though in this low crude price market, downstream's on fire.
Well, and I guess this can put things in perspective in terms of my question about Pakistan earlier in the show when I asked it was 100,000, 150,000. And it says right here, the proposed Shell cracker would convert 80 to 85,000 barrels per day. And that's just one plant.
It's just one. Yeah.
It's just one plant. All right. Those are our standard stories for the week. I threw in here just because it was too funny. Not an onion, but something from Thrillist that even Mark laughed at, which is, I'm always looking to be able to do that. What people in Houston say and what they actually mean. So what was one that jumped out to you, Mark?
So this actually, James comes up with some goofy stuff on here, but this is actually really funny. So I like this one. Sorry, traffic, be there soon. Translation: I didn't even leave the house yet, but I'm banking on the fact that there will be insane traffic on 610.
There definitely is. And then the one right after that also hits home. And it says, so what do you do? Translation: what sector of oil and gas are you in? Because I'm about to get laid off and could really use a good contact right now. And so we're having a lot of people reach out to us. Unfortunately, we just can't help everyone that's reaching out to us. And I've actually had to put together a form letter that just basically says, sorry, I'm not an employment agency.
Yeah, and so what I've been doing for people that are looking is refer them to the podcast, Oil and Gas Careers podcast. And a lot of people are really appreciative of listening to that because then it makes them think of things they would not have thought of. And like James says, James and I just don't have the bandwidth to help everybody out there that's looking for a job. But we do what we can when we can.
Well, and hopefully between this show and the career show, people are able to figure it out for themselves because I don't know if anybody listening hasn't listened to the career show. Mark is we are up to episode 19 now, and every week Mark gives a different career tip of the week. And if you just put all 19 of those together that he said so far, you're well on your way to getting a new job.
Yeah, plus we list the jobs that out there that are in the oil and gas industry that people may not be aware of.
Yeah, so go check that out, and then if you want to see other crazy things that people in Houston say, check out this Thrillist article. Everything we talk about, all of the links is in all of the events we're about to get into, and everything are at triberocket.com/TW55 because this is episode 55. And right now, we have to talk about our winner who comes from a small startup that, I think they might get places in life, Mark.
Yeah, it's Jeremy Warren with Baker Hughes, not really a small startup. He's their upstream chemical rep. Congratulations, Jeremy. You're going to love this bag.
I'm really excited for Baker Hughes, just because they've been around forever. Actually, just a couple days ago, I want to say the picture was from 1910 or something like that, showing some early plant of what is still Baker Hughes in Houston somewhere. And if anyone is not familiar internationally, Baker Hughes is one of the world's largest oil field services companies. It operates in over 90 countries, providing the oil and gas industry with products and services for oil drilling, formation evaluation, completion, production, and reservoir consulting. So we can get pretty Texas centric talking about oil and gas. And so if you haven't heard of Baker Hughes, take a look, because there's a reason they've been around that long. And let's go ahead and thank our sponsor, Red Wing. And I have to say this because this show, we do it for free, but we can't do it for free without Red Wing. So thank you very much to Red Wing for your support. And why don't we touch on the FR clothing again, Mark, because I mentioned it last week, but this head-to-toe, all-in-one solution that makes things easier for people trying to source things, because we're all about efficiencies on this show.
Yeah, so everybody knows Red Wing has great boots, but what you may not know is that Red Wing has a whole line of flame-resistant and protect PPE clothing. And they can source it all for you. So if your people or if you required to wear protective equipment in the oil patch, look at Red Wing. They have some really high quality stuff out there, and they're a great company to work with.
Great company to work with. Very flexible, always available. Shout out to Chris over there for always hooking us up with the winners, because we record pretty darn early in the morning on Thursdays. If you want your own offshore bag, there's no purchase necessary. See official site for details. That's redwingshoes.com/podcast. It's redwingshoes.com/podcast. And again, thank them very much for their continued support of the show. And thank you very much for submitting your information and supporting us in this venture. All right, Mark, let's talk about events, because we've got a couple coming up. One of your insider events, and if you're not on Mark's list, hurry up and do that. triberocket.com/events. We'll take you right there, because we only touch on a couple of them. There's, I think, 5 or 6 more this week that are happening. Future of oil prices and impacts. Talk about this.
Yeah, so this is the American Turkish Business Council and also the Texas Turkish American Chamber of Commerce, which, by the way, if you are a member of American Turkish Business Council, I have been published in their business magazine several times talking about the U.S. oil and gas industry. Great group of people. Now they're doing this luncheon, and they have actually Mr. Ron Higgins, and most people know who he is. He's the vice president of Gulf Publishing Company, and what they're going to do is they're going to talk about the future of oil prices and how this will impact the economy of Texas. So it's a small fee to go. This is some great insider baseball information, and you actually get to meet a lot of Turkish oil and gas people that are doing business here in Houston. Great group of people. Shout out to Orhan out there. He runs that group. Go to this. I'm gonna be there. It's a chance to learn with your peers.
And that's Thursday, March 24th at the Turquoise Center on West Belfour Avenue here in Houston, Texas. And then we have one that's not in Houston, it's in Dallas, and it's the 2016 International Petrochemical Conference. Need I say more?
Yeah, no, not really. If you're in upstream or service or midstream and you don't know anything about downstream, you don't know anything about petrochemicals, but you hear us talking about it, go to this conference. Go learn that part of the business. If you're a sales guy and your pipeline is dried up because you've been used to selling upstream, go here. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to make it, but it's a great learning event, and you get to actually meet the people that are in the petrochemical business, which is booming right now.
And that's something that I can't stress enough, because Mark was the one that finally said, "Hey, James, we got to break you out of that upstream crib that you live in." because this is a much bigger industry than you ever knew. And I'd been in the industry for 3.5 years at that point. And if you don't know the whole industry, you're really limiting yourself, not only in job opportunities, but just your understanding and your ability to do whatever you're doing day to day.
Yeah, it's one of the things that it's a one of the keys to our success as a company is when something happens in the oil patch like this low crude price, we just focus our clients on downstream, which have tons of money. Having that flexibility, either personally or from a company point of view, is just vital if you really want to capitalize on this industry.
All right, great stuff. And another place to capitalize on this industry is the Global Oil and Gas Network LinkedIn group. Tell them about it, Mark.
Yeah, it's our LinkedIn group is growing like crazy. It's a bunch of your peers, and the nice thing is, I love how helpful everybody is in this group. So I've watched salespeople trade business contacts. I've seen people help each other, with jobs. James and I have helped people in the group. So it's a very useful group. And if you listen to the show, this is almost like the companion to the show, and it's going to be the companion to all of our future podcasts that you don't know about yet, but that are coming out. So if you listen to the show, go join our LinkedIn group. You'll be so glad you did.
TribeRocket.com/LinkedIn will take you straight there. Just click join group and we will approve you as soon as humanly possible. And then we have to round things out with reviews because we didn't get any last week, Mark.
Whoa.
Hey. We didn't get any.
Hey, I asked each one of y'all, don't turn your head. I asked you as a personal favor to give me a review. So I'll let you slide, right? Because everybody's busy. Can you do me a favor this week, though? Can you take the minute and a half, go give us a review, do me a personal favor? What this does is it allows us to rise to the top in the search engine rankings and in iTunes, which allows us to continue to do this show and help people like you. So please do me a personal favor. Go give us a review.
It's at TribeRocket.com/TW reviews. Take you straight into the iTunes store where you can leave that review. If you don't have an Apple account, you have to set one up. It also takes literally no time. Not literally, but kind of. I said literally. I hate when people do that.
If they're listening in iTunes, they do have an Apple account.
That's true, but a lot of people listen on the show or on the website too. So got to throw that in there. And if you've made it this far in the show, please share it with your family and your friends and your coworkers. Send an all-company email. Do whatever you got to do. Get the word out. It's at TribeRocket.com/share-LI. We'll share it straight on LinkedIn /share-FB. We'll share it straight on Facebook and /share-TW. We'll share it straight on Twitter. With that said, Mark, are you ready to go?
Yeah. Remember, folks, oops.
You did it again.
Ask me again.
All right, Mark, are you ready to get out of here?
Yeah. Do great work, pay it forward, and we will see you next time.
Go find some grease, guys.
Everything it takes to build large, what's the freaking word I'm looking for?